right. All right, so is everyone able to see my screen? It should say Dementia Friendly Communities.
Yes, all good,
All
Talia.
right. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation about dementia-friendly communities. My name is Talia Napadiak, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Alzheimer's Society of Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland, and Haliburton. And here with me today is my fabulous colleague, Chris Van Leuven, who I believe some of you know. And she is one of our education coordinators here at the Society. So before I get going, I just wanted to mention some housekeeping items. Although Zoom technology is wonderful, I do find that I'm not always able to see everyone's faces or the chat box when I'm sharing my screen, which means that I'm not always aware when someone is trying to get my attention. This is a fairly interactive presentation, so I appreciate your patience if you're trying to respond to a question or ask a question and I'm not seeing you. It's helpful if you use the raise hand function, which you can find in the bottom right menu with the emoji reactions. If I miss your hand up, don't worry, as I'll be sure to open the floor to questions at the end of the presentation, and I'll stop sharing my screen at that time so I'll be able to see you. So today's presentation on dementia-friendly communities was created to help members of the public who haven't had the experience living with or caring for someone living with dementia to learn about some of the barriers that folks who live with dementia may encounter while navigating their communities. The goal is to provide a better understanding of dementia and the needs of people living with dementia as they go about their everyday activities. We want everyone to recognize that there are many things that we can do to help people with dementia to live well in their community and continue to participate in the activities that they enjoy. I am aware on our call today that we're fortunate to have some people who do have firsthand experience supporting someone who lives with dementia. As we work our way through the content, I would encourage you to think about how the businesses or organizations that you frequent could have done better to accommodate your needs as a care partner and the needs of the person you support. By sharing your experience and your valuable perspectives, you can help to reduce stigma and improve the experience for others moving forward. To start, I'd like you to take a moment to consider and reflect on the following questions. What are some of the things that you love to do? Could you still do those things with ease if you had trouble navigating your community or had difficulty with everyday tasks? Were experiencing changes with your memory? Had limited people to help you, or were without a driver's license? What could others do to support you to remain independent and active? If you were living with dementia, what would your top 3 priorities be while living in the community? And I'd like to give you an opportunity if you would like to share some of the answers to these questions. All right, that's okay. So a dementia-friendly community is a place where people living with dementia and their care partners are welcomed, included, and supported. It is a community that pays attention to the social and physical needs of the person living with dementia. Now, in order to build a dementia-friendly community, it's helpful if we develop our understanding of what dementia is. The more we understand dementia, the better equipped we are to recognize when someone may be living with dementia, offer our assistance where appropriate, and dispel the myths associated with dementia, which can in turn reduce stigma. So in our presentation today, we hope to build your understanding of what dementia is, help you to be able to recognize the common signs of dementia, and provide some strategies for interacting with people living with dementia positively. And we hope to share examples of the lived experience of those living with dementia. Now, why are we here today, and why should you be concerned? It is important to understand how Alzheimer's disease and dementia are currently impacting Canadians. Right now, 564,000 Canadians are living with some form of dementia, and that is a pretty startling statistic as it translates to approximately 1 in 11 Canadians currently living with a diagnosis of dementia. It is projected that 912,000 Canadians will be living with dementia within the next 15 years if a cure is not found. Cases of dementia are on the rise, and they are expected to continue to rise, which does make sense considering that our population is aging, and age is the greatest risk factor for developing dementia. It is also important to note that 1 in 5 people will, at some point in their lives, experience being a care partner for somebody living with dementia. Lastly, and this statistic I always find a little sad, 46% of Canadians admit that they would feel ashamed or embarrassed if they had dementia. So by working towards building a dementia-friendly community, we can reduce the stigma associated with the disease, supporting those living with dementia to be able to access the help they need to continue to live well in their communities and positively engage. So, a question that frequently gets asked is, what is dementia? And what is the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? So I'm hoping that this graphic will help to explain that a little bit. So the term dementia doesn't actually refer to one specific disease. Rather, it's an overall term for a set of symptoms that are caused by disorders affecting the brain. Changes can include memory loss, problems with language, trouble with familiar tasks, and dementia is diagnosed when the changes start to affect the person's everyday activities. So dementia is what we call an umbrella term that means memory loss. So underneath that umbrella, an individual could have one of several different disorders. So we're going to look at the most 4 common types of dementia. And it's important to note that these 4 types are progressive, meaning that there is no cure at this time. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. The changes in the brain from Alzheimer's disease start in the hippocampus, and this is the part of the brain where we make memories. So that's why with Alzheimer's disease, oftentimes the first symptom that we will see is that short-term memory loss. And then the changes in the brain slowly progress to other brain regions. And Alzheimer's disease accounts for approximately 60 to 80% of dementia diagnoses. Vascular dementia occurs because of impaired blood flow to the brain, which is often due to a stroke. The loss of blood flow results in oxygen deprivation to the cells in the brain, leading to cell damage and death. The location of the stroke in the brain will determine the type of symptoms and cognitive changes the person experiences. And vascular dementia accounts for approximately 20% of dementia diagnoses. With Lewy body dementia, areas of the brain involved in movement and thinking are most affected. A person may experience symptoms similar to those of both Parkinson's disease, such as rigidity and tremors, stooped posture, or slow shuffling movements, and Alzheimer's disease, such as loss of memory, language, and reasoning. Marked fluctuations in alertness may also be experienced. Memory difficulties may not be an early symptom, but can develop as it progresses. Visual hallucinations, so perceiving things visually that are not real, are common and can be worse during times of increased confusion. And Lewy body dementia accounts for approximately 5 to 15% of dementia diagnoses. Lastly, frontotemporal dementia is an umbrella term for a group of rare disorders that primarily affect the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. So these areas are generally associated with personality, behavior, emotions, language, speech, abstract thinking, and movement. In some cases, brain cells in this area shrink and die. In other cases, the brain cells in these areas get larger, containing round silver Pick's bodies. So you'll sometimes hear it referred to as Pick's disease. In both situations, the changes in the brain often lead to changes in behavior and difficulties with speech in the early stages. It is estimated that approximately 2 to 5% of all dementia cases are frontotemporal dementia. And interestingly enough, frontotemporal dementia accounts for up to 20% of all dementias in those who are diagnosed under the age of 65. So that's what we refer to as early onset dementia. Does anyone have any questions before I move on about dementia being an umbrella term? Oh,
yes, this is Nina. I've heard the terminology from our neurologist several times of the Alzheimer's spectrum. Can you describe what that means, if it means anything?
So I haven't heard the term Alzheimer's spectrum before. My best educated guess is potentially they are referring to the dementia spectrum. So the umbrella term of dementia, and then the various disorders that can fall underneath that. Or my other guess would be that it is the symptoms that are appearing, the signs and symptoms that an individual is exhibiting who has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, because two people can have the same diagnosis and exhibit different symptoms. So those are my two guesses as to potentially what they are referring to. I'll ask Chris as well if she might have an idea.
Yeah, thanks, Talia. I also, I've not heard of Alzheimer's spectrum, but I feel like you probably hit the nail on the head there. When we think about Alzheimer's disease, there's a number of different kind of common symptoms that go along with Alzheimer's disease. We at the Alzheimer's Society identify 10 warning signs or common symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. And for each individual, the experience is different. So they may only really exhibit 2 or 3 of those 10 common symptoms. And it can be different for everybody. So I think that's an excellent guess. And but yeah, that's a new term for me. So I may have to Google that one. Thank you so much, Nina, for your question.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm a medical professional, and that's what I figured it is that it's the number of symptoms a person has on a scale. And I haven't been able really to find much about it either. But the other question was, is a person expected to advance on that scale? And you don't have to answer that. That's just my other thought on it.
Yes, that's a really good question. Or another thought. I mean, if we think of Alzheimer's disease as an umbrella term, and they're using Alzheimer's spectrum in the same way that they would use the umbrella of Alzheimer's disease or dementia, yeah, it's hard to know if it's something that would advance, because then we can also fall into thinking about the progression of Alzheimer's disease, which we know progresses in kind of stages as well. So hard to know exactly what was meant by that, but definitely something to think about. And I know that I'll be Googling it later.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and thank you, Nina. You've definitely given us something to kind of go and research. So that's helpful. Now I'm going to discuss reversible dementia, or disorders, or things that can create a temporary dementia. So these conditions can actually be assessed, treated, and reversed. That's why we always advise people to seek out medical advice if they have any concerns relating to memory or cognition, because oftentimes a healthcare practitioner will start by ruling out any potential reversible causes of memory loss. So these treatable conditions can include depression. So depression can mimic dementia with symptoms such as mood changes, personality changes, apathy, loss of ambition, and social isolation. Infection or delirium can cause severe dementia-like symptoms in a very short period of time, within hours or days, and is often seen in untreated UTIs. So oftentimes we'll see people present at the hospital, and they appear to be disoriented, and then they'll get diagnosed with a UTI and then receive antibiotics, and that delirium will actually clear up rather quickly. The side effects of medication, or not taking them properly, taking too many, can cause a temporary dementia. Metabolic disorders like a thyroid condition, liver disease, or diabetes can also contribute to dementia-like symptoms. Vision or hearing impairment. If these impairments are left untreated, they can cause confusion and disorientation. And sleep disorders. So everyone on this call knows how important sleep is to our physical and mental well-being. So disorders like sleep deprivation, insomnia, and sleep apnea over a long period of time can contribute to dementia-like symptoms. Nutritional disorders such as dietary or vitamin deficiencies can also cause dementia symptoms. Other potential causes are physical trauma due to a fall or a concussion, a tumor, or dehydration. Pardon me. So these treatable conditions can be reversed or cured, and the brain will actually regain the lost functions when these conditions are treated. So I'm going to hand things over to Chris here to discuss what a person living with dementia may or may not look like.
Great, thanks so much, Talia. Yeah, so as you can see on the screen, we have a picture of a gentleman, and something's, he's clearly struggling with some physical limitations there. And as you look at this gentleman, and if you thought that maybe you might saw him using the library today, if you were visiting the library or working at the library, what might you do to help this guy out? And feel free to pop some answers in the chat, or you can always just unmute and shout an answer out if you'd like.
Well, I'd offer to carry his books.
Yes, thank you, Nina. Yes, I think a lot of us would. Yeah, and Hilda said in the chat, you'd offer to open a door or hold the door for him. Great answers. So if someone were trying to navigate the library and they had a cast on one leg and they were using crutches, we would clearly recognize that the person has some challenges, and we would see the types of barriers that type of physical limitation would cause. So we'd be pretty quick to offer our assistance in most cases, whether that would mean, helping them to get books off the shelf, carrying their books up to the circulation desk, holding doors for them, offering them a chair. We would be able to see what was going on, and we would want to be able to support them to continue to be able to use the library. When somebody's living with dementia, however, we're not able to see those brain changes from the outside. So it's helpful to us, though, to understand what might be happening in the brain when somebody has dementia, because it provides that context that we need to understand those cognitive and those behavior changes that we do see. So here on the screen, in the image on the left, you can see a healthy brain. So this is the brain of a healthy adult. And on the right, you can see an illustration of a brain that has shrunk due to dementia. And as brain cells, are changed or destroyed because of dementia, that brain tissue, it shrinks and it recedes, and that's termed atrophy. We see larger gaps here in the ventricles of the brain, and we see that the spaces in the brain and the folds in the brain are more apparent. And here's just another image. Again, on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a brain of a healthy adult without Alzheimer's disease. And on the right, you can see a brain with Alzheimer's, a person who's living with Alzheimer's. And so where you see those gaps in the brain, in those folds, that directly relates to a loss of function for the part of the brain that particular area of the brain is responsible for controlling. So really, when we see this type of image, not only does it help kind of instill some empathy for the changes that we see behaviorally and cognitively, but it also makes us realize that it's really a wonder that people who live with dementia are able to function as well as they do, knowing what's happening in their brain. So we know we can't just tell by looking at somebody from the outside whether or not they have dementia. So how do we tell if a person might be living with dementia? Over the next slides, Talia and I are going to go through 10 of the most common symptoms of dementia, which we hope will help you later on to identify a person living with dementia who might need some extra support. This first warning sign here, changes in mood and behavior. We all have changes in our mood. We kind of fluctuate from time to time. Maybe we're too tired, so we're grumpy. Maybe we're a little hangry. But somebody who's living with dementia, they can change moods pretty quickly and seemingly with no reason. The person might be laughing one minute, crying the next, or acting in a way that's not really consistent with the situation. Damage to the brain makes it difficult for the person to regulate their moods in relation to what's happening in their environment. Our next sign here is problems with language. So we've all had moments where we've, struggled to find a word or think of a person's name or get the word off our tongue. But somebody living with dementia, they might be struggling to find simple words. They might misuse words without noticing. They may use words in a sentence without providing a clear message. Or if English wasn't the first language that they learned, they may revert back to their first language that they learned in childhood. And this can really make it difficult for us to understand the meaning of what a person is saying. Next, we have problems with abstract thinking. So here, the person might have trouble making sense of icons on an ATM. They may have difficulty making change or understanding the meaning or concept of money. The person might not get some figures of speech. For example, they may not understand sarcasm. They may not understand the punchline of jokes. And idioms like, it's raining cats and dogs, they may try and take that type of sentence literally, and it may really not make sense to them, or they may find it quite confusing. Next, we have difficulty performing familiar tasks. So we've all had times when we've been distracted, maybe we forgot a step in a recipe, or maybe we've forgotten to serve part of a meal. But people living with dementia, they struggle with these tasks, not because they're distracted, although that could be part of it, but more often because they're having trouble recognizing visual cues and auditory cues. And they might forget sequencing of steps. So, getting dressed in the morning. It's kind of crucial that we put things on in a certain order. And that may become complicated for the person living with dementia to remember that underwear goes on first, then pants. The person might also have trouble with object recognition. So they might lose sense of what things are and how they work. So things like utensils, they may have trouble remembering exactly, how that fork and knife are supposed to coordinate to work together. Misplacing things is another common symptom of dementia. We all, set things down without thinking. I do it with my cell phone pretty much every day, and then I have to call from the home phone to track it down. But somebody living with dementia, they're misplacing things more often, or they're putting things away in spots that really don't make sense to us looking from the outside in. So maybe they've put their glasses in a kitchen cupboard, or maybe they've put the iron in the freezer. And then they forget that they've put those things there. And this can cause difficulties because they might start to think that other people are taking those items on them. And then they can become a bit suspicious. So we're halfway through this list of warning signs and symptoms, and I'm going to pass it back to Talia to cover the rest of the list.
Thank you, Chris.
This is Nina. Could I ask a question about misplacing things?
Of course.
So I've been told that goes away. Is that true? That suspicion and paranoia phase goes away at some point?
Yes. So Nina, as I'm sure you're aware, symptoms of dementia, it's progressive disease, right? So we may see subtle changes in the symptoms over the stages of the disease. So what's happening kind of in the middle stages of the disease, where you might see that suspiciousness happen in the early to middle stages, it's unfortunate because normally when we see those behaviors recede or go away, we can be relieved because we're like, oh, thankfully they're not acting suspicious anymore. But it's a double-edged sword because we know then that means that more changes have happened in the brain. So more deterioration has happened in the brain, and that's why they've moved past that symptom.
Yeah, that's the thing I heard as well. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much for your question.
All right, thank you, Chris. So as Chris just mentioned, a person living with dementia may have difficulties with sequencing activities. And this can include the initiation or starting of an activity. Therefore, you may see loss of initiative as a sign or symptom of dementia, even for an activity that they may have previously enjoyed. But they may still want to participate in an activity and enjoy participating, and may just need some supportive cueing or demonstrating. The person may come to their program or appointment at the wrong day, or show up on the right day, but at the wrong time or the wrong location. They may say something that's not consistent with the here and now. For example, mentioning wanting to go to a store that has been closed for a year, or visiting a friend who moved away, or we'll often see individuals referencing people who have previously passed away as if they're still with us. The person may get turned around even in a familiar environment or become lost. So people living with dementia have difficulties making memories and therefore may not recall when they have forgotten something because that memory was never recorded. So these memory lapses can have a great impact on someone's day-to-day life. For example, they may miss appointments, forget their PIN, or have difficulties paying bills. So oftentimes that's where a diagnosis of dementia will occur, when these problems are starting to affect their daily life and their daily activities. So personalities can change in subtle ways over time. However, a person living with dementia may experience more striking personality changes and can become confused, paranoid, suspicious, or withdrawn. Other personality changes may include lack of interest, fearfulness, or seemingly acting out of character. So, how we interact with the person as they are in the moment, rather than questioning their emotions or behaviors as being inconsistent with their personality, will help care partners and community members to engage with the person positively, working on the relationship. So, we'll sort of dive into that a little bit more later. Impaired judgment. Impaired judgment. So the person may make decisions that are uncharacteristic, like dressing in warm clothing on a hot day or making risky financial decisions. So this impaired judgment can put the person living with dementia at risk. So I know that was a lot of information. So I just like to take a moment and check in and provide an opportunity for any questions or comments you may have.
Hi, it's Caroline. On a personal note, my mother, who is 83, was diagnosed with dementia a few years back, and it's getting progressively worse. She's in a long-term care facility now. She still remembers the majority of us, and but what you've been talking about over the past few minutes rings very true in my mother's experience, especially with, I would say, in quotes, treatable or to change the dementia effects or change it and to reverse it or whatever. If she had chosen to do certain things back years ago, she may not have been in this situation now. And it's very sad and it's very difficult, especially for us or for myself and my siblings, to watch your parent living through this. And when she's sitting there in her chair and she's crying to you saying, I want to go home, I want to go home. It's very difficult, and she doesn't remember anything at all. She doesn't remember living with me. She doesn't know where I live now. All of that is gone, and it's such a deadly, but devastating and disease. And it's also, you just kind of wish for their release, if you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that perspective, Caroline. And I'm a big proponent of I think it's a great thing to be able to discuss your feelings and all your emotions, no matter whether they're positive or seemingly negative. Like, I think it's important to talk about your experience, whatever that experience is. It's so valuable to hear from people who have that lived experience. And it's true. It's a very challenging thing to watch someone that you love or that you're supporting go through the journey of dementia. And that's part of the work that we're doing here today, is trying to educate as many people as possible so that people living with dementia and people who are supporting people living with dementia don't have to feel kind of that isolation and don't have to go through that journey alone.
Yeah. My point, when I go and visit my mom, it's very difficult to go and it's extremely difficult to leave. But I think of it, I want to make her moment that she is with me or I'm with her positive and loving, even in that moment, because she can't forget in a couple hours down, or the next day, she won't remember that I was there, but in the moment she would. And that's
Yes.
what
That's exactly it. Exactly. We sort of switched to that. How can I make this interaction positive? And that moment by moment mentality is exactly what you should be doing.
And remembering that, even though people who live with dementia, they're experiencing memory loss, they may not remember exactly what you talked about during your visit. They may not even remember that you did visit. That a lot of times we have to remind ourselves that the emotions remain. So they will remember, how you made them feel in that time together. So Caroline, it sounds like you're doing amazing things to support your mom. And if you need anything from us, if we can be a resource for you, I have a couple things that I'm going to probably send your way after this session. I think that you would find valuable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think there are similarities in partners when one of the partners has dementia, because that person doesn't remember that 25 years of vacations and experiences and special birthdays, and they remember the partner and that they have a relationship with them and that they like them, but all of that other stuff is gone as well. And it's sad, it's heartbreaking, and sometimes you wish excuse me, the same, especially when they're having really bad days, it's like, why me? Why did this happen to me when it's really happening to them?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's true. Sometimes it can feel difficult when, they are the ones going through it. But I think the experience of being a care partner is just as valid as experiencing receiving a diagnosis of dementia and kind of moving through dementia. It's two different sides of the coin, but it's definitely, just as valid as the person living with dementia as well.
And the feelings that you're experiencing are not are as Tully was saying, they are valid and they do need to be acknowledged. We do have some on the horizon, some virtual education that I think, just based on our conversation today, might be valuable for everyone. So if you haven't received the posters about our upcoming virtual education, you can feel free to give me an email and I will send them out to you. I'm Chris at alzheimerjourney.ca. But we do have one coming up on ambiguous loss and grief for care partners, and that touches on some of those emotions that care partners go through, that I think could be valuable.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like that was a very valuable reflection period. I really appreciated that candid discussion. So we are now going to watch a short video, which is going to give a firsthand perspective of living with dementia and navigating some everyday situations and environments, including riding the city bus, doing some banking, and visiting the grocery store.
Tomorrow morning from 7 o'clock here on 107.9 FM.
And I just want to double check that the audio is coming through.
Yes, loud and clear.
Right. It's not raining. Good. What? I've forgotten. Should I
Just
I
both
thought-
sit down. Just
Oh.
both sit down.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that way. I don't what? Oh, I don't know. Could you please? Oh. It's my list. Should I go? So I don't know quite what. Oh dear. Chicken cheese.
What?
Chicken cheese?
Sorry.
Chicken. Oh. Oh. I don't know.
On air as the sun rises tomorrow morning from 7
Oops. So what did you notice about that person's ability to use services such as public transportation, the ATM, or grocery shopping?
Well, they basically couldn't do any of it.
Yeah, it was challenging.
Confusion, frustration, like scared. And nobody's listening, taking the time to listen to them, or they didn't have the patience to wait until they can get their words out.
Mhm. Exactly. And you just sort of touched on this, but what reactions from others did the person encounter? And how do you think you would feel if people responded to you in that way?
I'd be angry,
Mhm.
like, hurt.
Mhm. And you notice that her sort of feeling of unease seems to increase as the day goes on, sort of with each sort of interaction she's having with people. Her discomfort is rising. What do you think could have been done to support this person and improve their experience?
Well, I can understand certain scenarios like the bus and stuff. He's on a schedule but take the time to say, here, come and sit here. And, hopefully, near the front, he could say, ma'am, do you know where you want me to go? Kind of thing, like acknowledge that she had a bit of an issue, but not, make her feel or make her stand out like, to embarrass her.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's true. Sometimes with people living with dementia, just that few extra seconds to enhance communication can make a world of difference. So, it's such a fast-paced world, but just taking that extra time to allow the communication to happen can be very helpful. And even if the bus driver is educated, okay, these are the common signs and symptoms of dementia, then perhaps that could be top of mind to know, okay, maybe this person may be living with dementia, and I should just allow for some extra time and be able to support her to use the transit.
And in the chat, there was a couple suggestions as well. So Sherry said, in the bank, maybe somebody could have taken her aside to kind of ask what she needed help with. And Aaron said, somebody could have said, like, do you need a hand? Just
Yeah.
reaching out and offering some assistance.
Those are all great ideas. Okay, we are now going to watch an alternate version of this video that will hopefully leave you with more positive emotions.
People with dementia have experiences like this every day. A little bit of understanding, tolerance, and patience can make all the difference.
I'll tell you what, if you go into the seats just there,
Right.
when we get there, I'll call you, okay?
Okay, madam.
I can't get on.
Let me help you. This way.
Thank you.
Can I look at that list?
Yes.
Chicken and cheese.
Oh,
Let's go this way.
thank you. Find out how to become dementia friendly. Contact Alzheimer's Society today.
So you'll notice almost all of your suggestions were depicted in that second video. Just taking that extra time and asking, how can I support you? Instead of kind of just ignoring the person. So I'm going to turn things over to Chris to talk about some strategies for interacting with someone who's living with dementia who may need some support, just like the woman that we saw in the video.
Thanks so much, Talia. So yeah, as we know, for someone living with dementia, if they were navigating their community, but they did become lost or lost their way or didn't really know where they were at a moment, that does put them in a situation of risk. So that's why it's important for us as members of the community to be able to recognize the signs that somebody living with dementia might be lost and might need some assistance. So here's some tips just to help us identify that somebody might be confused or disoriented. So they may be inappropriately dressed for the weather or the circumstances. They might be standing still or, looking around for a long period of time. They could be pacing or acting nervous. Or you might hear them repeating the same question or statement within a short period of time. Those are some indicators. And once we've identified that somebody who's living with dementia might need our help, what steps can we take to assist them? So over the next 3 slides, we're going to talk about some tips for enhancing communication with the person. We're going to talk about some ways that we can offer help in a manner that's appropriate to the person and the situation, and what we should do in the case that the person's reality is different than our here and now reality, which sometimes happens with dementia. Here's some strategies for enhancing communication with the person. If possible, we want to try and take the person to a quiet place to reduce distractions. We want to face the person and make eye contact with them, or put yourself at eye level. Like if they're sitting down, you might want to sit with them. And that's just a good communication tip, but also if the person's kind of uncomfortable with eye contact. We want to listen and speak directly to the person living with dementia. Even if their care partner, if they have a companion or if their care partner's with them, we want to make sure that we're addressing them specifically and not leaving them out of the conversation. We want to speak slowly and clearly in a pleasant tone. So oftentimes, if we are talking to somebody and it seems like they are not understanding what we're saying, we have a tendency, and it's just kind of innate, to want to speak louder at them. But we don't want to assume that somebody living with dementia can't hear us or understand us, because if we're speaking louder at them, then we may come across as intimidating. They may misread the situation and think that we are yelling at them. So always try and be slow and clear in just your regular tone of voice. We also want to allow the person time to answer. For somebody living with dementia, we often say that there's a 30-second rule. So it takes the person with dementia about 30 seconds longer to hear what's being said to them, process it, and formulate a response as it would your average person. We want to use short and simple sentences and just share one message at a time. We don't want to overwhelm them with too many instructions at once. We want to avoid slang, jargon, and metaphors that could be misinterpreted if taken literally. So as I mentioned before, sometimes the person, loses their ability to understand abstract comments. So we want to keep our language simple. Ask close-ended questions. So those are the questions that only require a yes or no answer and only ask one question at a time. And if the person doesn't respond right away, we want to repeat using the same wording that we used the first time. There again, it's kind of a natural instinct that if we say something to somebody and it seems like they didn't understand, we want to reword or rephrase what we had originally said, thinking that that's going to help the understanding. But for somebody that it takes them longer to process information, by rephrasing, you're sending them back to square one in the processing process. So all of a sudden they think that the message is new because you've said it differently. So they start again to kind of take it in, understand, and formulate a response. So it's best if you can just keep your messaging consistent, say the same thing in the same way, in the same calm and pleasant tone that you used the first time. Next, we want to offer appropriate help. So again, we want to approach from the front in an open and friendly manner. And I say approach from the front because sometimes people living with dementia lose their peripheral vision, so they can get a bit of tunnel vision. So if you're coming to them from the side or if you're coming to them from behind, you may startle them or they're not going to recognize that you're speaking to them. So always try and approach from the front. You want to introduce yourself and ask if you can help. And avoid making assumptions about what it is the person needs or what it is they're thinking. Again, offer those simple choices, providing clearer instructions, and answer any questions, even if you've already answered that question or provided that information. If it's your work environment, like at the library, it's really helpful if you can wear a name tag to identify you as staff or as somebody that can help. If you're outdoors, and maybe consider removing your hat and your sunglasses so that your facial expressions are more visible. If we're giving directions, it's helpful to provide visual cues or landmarks, and if possible, write those directions down for the person. And, barring that, offer to help them find their way or go with them or offer to call somebody for them. Next, let's talk about supporting the person's reality. So sometimes a person living with dementia, they become disoriented in their time and space. So we want to recognize how the person might be perceiving the situation. And we want to ask the person what we can do or how we can help them. This is a phrase that we use often at the Alzheimer's Society, and it's connect, don't correct. So, if the person is saying that they're trying to get to Zellers, and we know that Zellers closed 2 decades ago, we don't want to try and correct them because that might increase their anxiety. That may make the disorientation worse if we're saying, oh, that store hasn't been around for 20 years. So rather than, trying to correct them on that point of Zellers being open, it's best just to say, oh, I think I know the way to that store. Maybe I could help you get there, or even changing the topic or getting them talking about why they want to go to Zellers. Say, I like shopping there. What is it that you're looking for? What are you hoping to buy? Trying to get more information, using your detective hats to figure out how they're perceiving the situation. Oftentimes, if we observe the person's actions and their body language, that will communicate more than their words. So you might be able to tell, like, oh, maybe they're just wanting to go inside. They're acting like they're cold, they're shivering. You can invite the person to tell you more about what they're trying to do. But don't ask the person to multitask. So allow the person just to do one thing at a time. So if you're talking to them, but their focus is actually on, interacting with someone else or making change, just give them time to wrap up their first interaction before you try and engage them in more conversation. And remember, and this is really important, you're not going to have the perfect answer for every situation. So you can always, reach out for help if it happens to be a work environment, talk to your manager, or if you've encountered somebody on the street, they don't seem to have any identification, they don't seem to know where they are or where they're going, that's maybe the time to reach out to your local emergency resources. All right, I think Talia's gonna share a little bit about encountering somebody who's living with dementia as well.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so I mean, as you know, I do work for the Alzheimer's Society, but I actually, and I facilitate Dementia Friendly Communities training. But a situation presented itself where I used my knowledge and my training in just my personal life on a weekend. And I was so grateful that I knew exactly what to do. And it really hit home for me that this information and these tips and tricks, they do work. Because I used it successfully and I was like, this works, like it's true. So I'm a weekend walker. I like to get my Yeti and my coffee and just go for nice long walks on the weekend. So I was bopping around my neighborhood and then I did encounter an individual who was walking and it was very snowy. And they did have a walker with them. And so working at the Alzheimer's Society, I work really hard not to stigmatize older adults. So I sort of thought, should I see if everything's okay over here? And then I thought, no, I'm not going to stigmatize an older adult who's going for a walk. But as I passed them, they actually started chatting with me. So I started interacting with them and I sort of quickly realized this may be a situation where this individual is living with dementia. They had a walker with them and they were carrying a pair of shoes. They were wearing shoes, but they were also carrying a pair of shoes. So I thought, okay, that's a bit atypical. And then in conversation, I sort of realized, oh, they are a little disoriented. And so, I was asking, oh, they were looking for a purse, actually, is what happened. And then I sort of asking, oh, did you drop it? Or which direction did you come from? I can help retrace your steps and we can look for the purse. And they couldn't really provide a clear answer as to which direction they came from or where they were going. And so it took me a second to think, okay, what am I going to do here? Because there was a bit of a risk at hand because it was wintertime, lots of snow. I didn't know how far this individual had walked from their home. They did appear a little bit tired. So I just said, you know what, we're going to pop the brakes on the walker. You have a seat. And then I'm just going to think for a second. And I was thinking, you know what, I think at this point I may need to phone emergency services because I don't know where this individual lives. Luckily enough, a neighbor had seen what was happening and did come down about 10 houses. So this person had walked a significant length and the neighbor came down and said, oh, hello, so-and-so. And the individual didn't recognize the neighbor, but the neighbor introduced themselves to me and confirmed this person is living with dementia. So we were actually able to, so the neighbor drove his car down. The person living with dementia went in the car and we went to their house, but they did not recognize their house. And the neighbor, being super helpful, was going, this is your house. I promise, I wouldn't lie to you. This is your house. But knowing Dementia Friendly Communities training and knowing, a little bit about the experience of living with dementia. If you can imagine you're confused or you are disoriented and then someone who you don't recognize is trying to get you to go into a house that you don't recognize, that you don't think is yours, you can imagine how upsetting that would be. And you're already sort of potentially distressed or disoriented. So then I was like, okay, we're going to appeal. I just I didn't say anything to the neighbor, but I was like, okay, we're going to appeal to a need here. This person is cold. This person is tired. I'm sure they want to sit and get warm. So I said, you know what? Okay, we're just going to head inside. We're going to warm up, regroup, take a little breather, and then we'll go home. And then I modeled the way. So I went in front of them and I walked into the home, and they did follow. And then they wanted to, I said, do you want to take off your coat? And they said, well, how long are we going to be here for? And so I said, oh, about an hour. We're going to warm up. And they were like, okay. But then they started to take off their coat themselves. And then as we sort of progressed farther into the house, they were like, oh yes, I do. Yeah, this is my living room. And I'm like, oh, it's starting to feel a little bit familiar to you. Like, that's great. So it does work. It's a skill that we develop to kind of support the person's reality and enter their world. But it's always helpful just to imagine if you were disoriented or confused and someone was employing these strategies to you, would it make the anxiety and distress greater or lesser than? So come into the strange house that you don't know, that would stress me out. But okay, we're going to get warm. We're going to take a breather, regroup. That seems like I would feel, okay, we're just going to regroup here. So it does work, these strategies. They are a skill that you kind of have to practice. And it's proof that, you know, we will encounter people living with dementia in our communities, in our personal time, in our workspace. So I think it's very important that we educate ourselves on how to best support someone living with dementia, because that situation actually could have gone south very quickly. So I'm just so glad that I was able to interact with her. It was sort of the perfect thing that we encountered each other. So if you encounter someone who appears lost or confused, like I said, these communication and interaction strategies do work. And never feel, if your instinct is telling you I need to call emergency services, then absolutely you can call those emergency services. Two other strategies that you may try is looking to see if the individual is wearing a medic alert bracelet. And if you're living with or supporting a person living with dementia, you may want to consider registering for medic alert. And if you see a medic alert bracelet on someone, the symbol will be blue if it's representing that they have a diagnosis or they have memory loss. And if they're wearing it for reasons other than memory loss, the symbol will be red or silver. We also have companion cards, or cards that say, I'm someone living with memory loss. So you may encounter someone, for example, at the library who will be with someone living with dementia, who will pass you a card that says, I am supporting someone with memory loss. So that that indicates to you that they may require some additional support. So if you're interested in learning more about keeping people living with dementia in your community safe, there are some e-learning courses available free of charge. There's one called Living Safely in the Community, which is available through Finding Your Way. And the Finding Your Way website also offers additional resources, including family and care partner support and a downloadable resources and identification kit. So as we near the end of this presentation, I wanted to ask each of you to think about and decide upon one individual action that you can take to make your community or your workspace more dementia friendly. And I'd like to welcome you to share if you have any ideas of one thing that you've taken away from this presentation or that you want to employ in your daily life to contribute to a dementia friendly community.
It's Carol Ann. I want to thank you for offering this presentation. I'm going to bring this back to my staff and volunteers because it, in a sense, in any circumstances, when someone comes in and they're presenting any kind of like confusion or situation, one of the messages that's coming forth is just to not be in a rush, not be in a hurry, treat each person that comes into like the library or in your life circumstances with patience, kindness, and understanding, and give them and time. And because we can't diagnose people, but if you give them respect and dignity and to assist them, that goes a long way in also providing excellent customer service, being a community member, and basically a good person.
Exactly. Thank you, Carolyn. That honestly, that warmed my heart to hear that, because that's exactly the message of this presentation and this initiative. So thank you so much for that feedback.
Thank you, Carolyn. I find that, a lot of what we're talking about today, as you say, it's just, it's dementia friendly, but it's also just good customer service practice for people that are working in a customer service industry like a library. But even, as you say, just being a good neighbor.
And if anyone is interested in learning more about becoming Dementia Friendly Community, the Alzheimer's Society, as well as Dementia Friendly Canada, has created an interactive online course. So it's 4 e-modules, and it's about an hour in length. And it's available on the platform Alts Educate. And you do have to register, but you can registration is free to make an account. And I've done the training myself as well as Chris. So it is valuable and helpful. And it's nice because you can do it on your own time, and you can bring it to, let's say, your staff or volunteers as well. So before we depart today, I just want to share this short video from Dementia Friendly Canada, which helps to summarize what we've talked about today, and to emphasize the importance of building dementia friendly communities.
Did you know that more than 500,000 Canadians, like me, live with dementia? Or that 1 in 5 Canadians care for someone who lives with dementia? Like me, many people living with dementia still live in our communities after we are diagnosed. It isn't always easy, though. Often, we feel left out and worried about how we'll be treated by others. Sometimes people just don't understand what dementia is and how it affects the brain, or know what to do if we forget something or get confused. So they seem frustrated or dismissive, and sometimes the places we'd like to go are just more difficult to get around. I once got lost trying to find the washrooms in a restaurant because of the loud music, poor lighting, and confusing signs. But it doesn't have to be like this. Everyone in the community can play a part in helping people living with dementia feel welcome, and in creating accessible and inclusive spaces for everybody to enjoy. When our communities are dementia friendly, people living with dementia feel less worried about how we will be treated and more confident about going out. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to live with dementia in your community or workplace? Is your community supportive, inclusive, and accessible for people living with dementia? Is it dementia-friendly in ways that let people stay engaged in community life? Would you recognize the signs that someone may be living with dementia and be able to offer the right type of support? Would you be comfortable talking to someone if you knew they were living with dementia? Would you know how to respond if someone seemed confused or had trouble expressing themselves? Are the businesses, organizations, and public spaces in your community designed so people can use them independently without getting disoriented, lost, or experiencing stigma because they are living with dementia? People living with dementia shouldn't have to work harder than everyone else to stay a part of the community. Wouldn't it be great if the neighborhoods and communities that we all share we're dementia friendly. Together with the Alzheimer's Society and community members like you, let's keep challenging the stereotypes and building a dementia-friendly Canada where everyone feels welcomed and supported. Take the first step and visit alzheimer.ca/Dementia-Friendly Canada to learn more about Dementia Friendly Canada. You'll find lots of information, education, and resources to help you and your organization become more dementia-friendly members of your community.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today to learn about building dementia-friendly communities. As you can see, Chris and I's contact information is on the screen. So you're more than welcome to give us a call if you'd like to provide some feedback, ask questions, or if you're looking to get set up with our services, we're more than happy to help facilitate that as well. So at this time, we'll stop screen recording and we'll open the floor up to questions or feedback.